Veteran animator and story artist Franz Vischer departed Walt Disney Animation Studios last spring, but he hasn't allowed grass to grow very high under his feet. For the past 8 months, Franz alternated between work at Renegade Studios and working on new ideas for his career as an author. We sat down with him a couple of weeks back to discuss his newest book, A Very Fuddled Christmas, and the wider question about how a veteran animator with decades of features and shorts under his belt breaks into and sustains a second career in the book business. Like, for instance, how does a budding author break in? How does an author sustain a career? And how much support does a book writer receive from publishers in the 21st century? We found Mr. Vischer's answers in this, his second TAG interview, quite enlightening. We are here today talking to Franz Vischer about A Very Fuddled Christmas and writing books in general, and how he came to get interested in the book writing and book publishing business when he's such a successful animator and story artist. So, Franz, what I want to know is, you started out at Cal Arts in the late 70s, correct?
Yeah, 70s.
And then you almost immediately went to Disney's, didn't you?
Yeah.
With a whole lot of your peers?
Yeah, a whole group of us.
And you're animating, you're storyboarding, you're doing all this stuff. What got you interested in writing books in the first place, and what was the first book that you wrote? And how did you come to write it?
Okay, well, I've always loved books as a kid. I love reading, and I love it when a book can just really absorb you in a whole different world, kind of transport you, just like the best Disney animation did as well. So that there was an interest there. I growing up, I certainly never thought about actually doing books, but animating, where both working in story and animating on a feature, oftentimes just the frustration of disagreements of the direction that a story took, or animating a scene that I knew in my gut wasn't right. The story point was forced or whatever, and just there,
there was nothing you could do about it.
Right, exactly.
Like somebody else made the decision. Yeah, it's fine.
Yeah, and you were stuck, and often that frustration would just drive me to just play around with my own with story ideas. And my first book, Jimmy Dabble, was published in 2001. And another thing, I think I have certainly plenty of inspiration, but I think the main inspiration for me is Roald Dahl as a writer. I've always loved his books, and I actually wrote a script on one of his stories, which I tried to sell, The Fantastic Mr. Fox, which a few years ago was made into a feature. Not my version of it, but that kind of got me going.
Yours was hand drawn. Your version was a hand drawn animated.
Right. Yeah.
And this was stop motion.
Right, yeah. But yeah, I started playing around. I think when my son was born, when was it? 1993 he was born. I would just sketch him a lot. That kind of inspired me just to make a little character. And we had chickens in our backyard at the time, and he would play with them. And that gave me a story idea of this kid on a farm who did his chores in his own quirky way, kind of knocking heads with his parents. So, and I love the idea of writing. And it certainly isn't easy. I've seen authors speak at book signings and things. I remember a few women who would say, who had the kids to deal with, who would get up at 5 o'clock or earlier and get an hour or two of writing in. And they just had to structure their day around what their duties were, whether it was leaving to work or dealing with kids at home. And that's what I do as well.
Well, Jimmy Dabble. Now, was that the first book that you wrote all the way through, or just the first that you were able to publish?
I think both. I mean, I did do some earlier writing, but I never I knew either it wasn't good enough or whatever, but I never pursued actually publishing anything. And even with Jimmy Dabble, when I first played around with it, it really was very organic. I had a basic idea and just sort of scribbled some story points, and I kind of worked in connecting them, but I didn't even know if I was working on a film or a book or whatever.
Was it maybe a film that you were going to pitch to Disney at one point, or did you decide, no, I'm going to make this as a book?
Yeah, I actually did. I was working on it as a book, and then at one point when in the 90s, the mid-90s, when animation was really booming here, and I had a choice between going to DreamWorks or Disney, I actually pitched it as a feature film at DreamWorks.
Yeah.
But ultimately that never happened. But I did get it published as a book.
What was your reaction when you pitched it as a film at DreamWorks? Interested, but
yeah, it was
maybe.
Funny, no, Gary Kreisel, I think it was him. He was in charge of the Disney.
DreamWorks Television.
He had been at Disney TV. Started DreamWorks TV, and they were also looking into doing lower budget theatrical features, which I actually prefer. I'd much rather work on a character-oriented, smaller film.
Right.
So, and I saw this as that, so I pitched it, and he actually said, "Well, we have more interest, in publishing books," and he thought that this was a perfect fit for that kind of a thing.
Right.
So.
And that was about 95, 96, 97. And
I ended up going to work at DreamWorks in 1996. And kept working on the book and eventually got it published.
And now, that's fascinating to me. How did you ended up from pitching it to Gary, and then at that point, was it finished, or was it half finished, or you had the story done but you didn't have it polished?
Yeah, I don't think I even had it fully written out. I was still in the process of it. I knew the story in my head and I had the basic beats, but it wasn't word for word written out. And then I spoke to someone there who suggested, and I must have had a good 50,000 words by then.
Yeah.
And they suggested to bring it down to less than 500 words and make it a picture book.
Oh, yeah, that would have been difficult.
Yeah, radically different. And
different book.
That was an executive's advice, and I didn't take it. I stuck to doing it as what it became is a middle grade novel. So for kids ages or grades 2nd through 6th, roughly.
So it's a late elementary school type novel.
Right.
How did you find the time to do it? Because all the time that you're writing it, you're working full time in the studios.
Yeah.
How did you carve out your day?
Yeah, it's difficult, but I really wanted to do it, and so I'm more of a morning person than an evening. So I got up early, often 5:30 or so, and got an hour or two in before I had to leave for work and bring my kids to school.
Sit down at the desk and
do the day job. And even there, too, I would sometimes work during lunch or driving to work. I was constantly dealing with little story issues, and I could just solve those. And I have little notepads everywhere in my car and jackets and whatnot. So
every time you stopped at a light, you wrote something down.
Yeah, I literally had times where I was in the thick of something and I kept scribbling, and then somebody would honk behind me because the light had turned green, and okay, I go, and I'm thinking, don't forget till the next, hoping for a red light.
Ever pull over?
I have done that too, yeah, and I even bought one of those little, I hate the idea, although they do work, those little voice recorders, so.
You could record your inspiration as it happened.
Exactly, yeah.
Well, so how long did it take you to finally shape the book up to where you pitched it to a publisher? And then that's question one. Question two is then, how did you ultimately pitch it to a publisher? Did you have any contacts through the studios or?
Yeah. I did get help from DreamWorks actually. Because originally Gary Kreisel said they had plans to have their own DreamWorks publishing company, which never came about. But they did strike up a partnership with Penguin. And they sent my rough draft of Jimmy Dabble there, and
was it illustrated at that point?
No, I had a number of illustrations
That you had with it.
Yeah.
But not all of them.
Right. Yeah, I ended up, because the story evolved a bit too. Once I got an editor, and things are quite different today too. The editor that I had there spent a fair amount of time working with me, working over the manuscript, just kind of finding the voice for it, and throwing out entire chapters, and even things where just helping me with actual writing, where she would point out, you're don't say it, show it. Get out character, not by just relating, just telling the reader a character's thoughts. Show what they're thinking by their actions. So I was learning quite a bit, and she spent quite a bit of time with me, the editor. So it was a good year that we were working together before it was ready to be published. And I actually left DreamWorks before the book was published.
And the book was published in 2001.
Yes, yeah.
And you left DreamWorks I think
2000, yeah.
And went back to Disney at that point?
No, I actually, let's see. No, I went over to Klasky Csupo.
Oh, okay.
Quite a change for me. But yeah, I was a sequence director there, working on the let's see, what was it? The Rugrats Meet the Wild Thornberries.
So that was their third feature that they did,
I think so. Yeah.
So you were over there. How did you get recruited for that? Because I don't think we got into that much in our last interview.
The one of the two directors, and I'm blanking out on his name, but he worked at DreamWorks for a while in story. So he was, and I was storyboarding at the time on Tusker, the film about elephants.
Got moved around to different studios,
right.
But never made.
Never made, yeah. It's too bad. It had a great premise, but anyway, I met this director, and he left DreamWorks. He was out there for only 6 months, and really didn't work out. He wasn't happy there, but we stayed in touch, and I got a call from him.
Had he come from Klasky, and then
yeah, he directed the first one.
So you were the co-director of the third?
No. I was a sequence director. So there were two overall directors, and then there were Rick Farmelo was there.
Oh yeah.
And Raul Garcia, I think. So a few others, and I had a great time there. I wanted to plus the animation as much as we could, but yeah, I oversaw the storyboards of my sequences, and did quite a bit of animation as well.
And that lasted into 2002, and
yeah, it was a few years.
How long did it take to do that particular feature? Was it like 24 months, 36 months?
Yeah, no, it was about 2 years or so.
Okay.
Yeah.
And then when that picture wrapped, then you went back to Disney. Was it at that point, or?
I think, gosh, but where did I go? Because I worked a number of short-term projects over at Disney. No, I didn't go back to Disney. I think I did the Curious George feature.
Oh, okay.
Over at Universal.
So you're over with Matt O'Callaghan.
Right. Yeah.
Were you boarding on that and animating, or were you?
I did both. Yeah, I started doing storyboards, and Matt wasn't on yet at that point.
Did you stay all the way through to the end?
Yeah.
Okay, so you worked with Matt when he got there.
Right. Yeah.
And Matt O'Callaghan, for people who don't know, was a Disney animator who's been directing various features and shorts, most recently probably
a lot of Warner Brothers
shorts.
Yeah.
So, yeah, and Matt was back at Sony Pictures Animation recently. I don't know on what project, but he was down there.
Right. Yeah.
So,
yeah, we've known each other since Cal Arts.
So what happened with? I guess my next question is, okay, so you've published the first book, and it does pretty well.
Yeah, I think it did okay. It certainly didn't make me wealthy. I got an advance on the book, which was great, and beyond that was all the money I saw on it.
Okay.
And one unfortunate thing, and this happens apparently quite regularly in publishing, that my editor left before the book came out.
Yeah, that's not good. But they move around.
There's quite a bit of turnover, in publishing. So that didn't help me. And I think the next thing in terms of publishing I did was to write a sequel to Jimmy Davil. I came up with a second story idea.
Yeah.
And I never was given a new editor there. I just had a contact person at Penguin. So whatever questions and whatnot. So I sent them this outline and was turned down. And also just to backtrack to another thing, and whether my editor was there or not, I don't know if that would have made any difference. But once the book was published and available in stores, they pretty much just turned their back and good luck, and that's that. The rest is up to you.
So at that point, had you learned the art of self-promotion?
Yeah, not at all.
So
and I'm still learning.
You didn't do any YouTube videos, and you didn't do any.
No, I don't think YouTube existed.
Right, probably not in 2001, or it was in its infancy.
Yeah.
It was still into the cat playing the piano and people falling out of windows phase.
Right.
I guess the question that I would have then. What lessons did you learn from your first publishing experience, and what did you build on for book number 2 and now book number 3?
All right. So the publicity side, there's a wealth that I learned on that, but and really I had no one to help me, so it was kind of on my own. I would just call stores and see if they would do a book signing, and oftentimes that's what it took to get a store to stock the book. Right. So I would just call them up and tell them I'm an artist. I wrote this book and blah blah blah, and I had some success with that. In fact, I was really fortunate. The very first one, the very first signing I did for that.
That was a Davil book?
The Jimmy Davil book, yeah. That Kelly Asbury, who I knew from before, but he was at DreamWorks at the time that I'd been there, and he had told me about Storyopolis, which was a big store. They've downsized and moved several times, but they were on Robinson in West LA, and a really big store. And so he put in a call for me and put in a good word for me about doing a book signing, and it was quite a big deal, actually. And then I can't even remember how this came about. I think I saw Brad Bird and mentioned to him how I'm getting this book published, and he did the same thing, just voluntarily. He said, "Oh, I know the people that own Storyopolis," and he put in a call, and I got a book signing there.
And how did that book signing go?
And that went great. That was quite good. But they also told me that you need we want a celebrity to read the book, and who did I know? And I ended up I had met at a party a man named Stephen Michael Schwartz, who was with Parachute Express, which is a children's singing group. Yeah. And so I called him up. I'd met him through Jerry Reese, actually, at a party at their house, and the director, Jerry Reese. And he agreed to do it. So we read it together. I did a couple of voices of some of the characters. So we read 1 or 2 chapters.
You did an audio book.
And practically, yeah. And he brought his guitar and sang a bit. And they ended up, I said, can you guys sell some of their CDs there, Parachute Express, which the store did. So yeah, we had.
So
a big
you made
crowd.
a CD?
No.
Oh.
No, we didn't. No, I would love to do that.
Books on tape.
It's I did talk to Penguin about doing a book on tape and trying to do some fun music with it, but yeah, that never came about.
Yeah.
So they basically, once they were done publishing, they were done with me. So
thanks very much.
Yeah,
we'll stock it. Yeah, maybe.
And I have another story I could tell you real quick. There was an event, and this kind of I learned a lot from this the hard way, as I have most things that I've learned.
Most things are learned the hard way.
Yeah.
I've discovered that in life.
Yeah. But there was a book signing at a Barnes & Noble in Valencia, or rather it was a book fair, and they had a number of authors there, and so I had a time slot on a Saturday morning. So I showed up, and I had a table with my books, and basically I just stood there and just let people browse, and I would say hi and whatever. But by nature I am no salesman, and I hate the idea of I don't know.
Showing your book right there on the thing.
Yeah. And I remember going into certain stores and salesmen just hounding you, and that I cannot do that. But the thing that was amazing is that overlapping with my shift, about an hour into my shift, somebody shows up next to me who had done a book that it was based on a PBS show, and the drawing was awful, and he sets up shop and just immediately he's out there, Mr. Car Salesman, and not approaching people, he was accosting people and shoving his book in their faces. I mean, there were parents with their kids walking around, and he would just, "Hey, Johnny, don't you want to do? What do you think of this book? Huh? Don't you want your parents to buy this? Huh? And just he just looked like a complete, a-hole.
How many books did he sell?
See, exactly. I'm standing here observing this guy and thinking to myself, what a jerk. And the guy's succeeding. He was selling books left and right, and I was pissed off about it. I remember driving home thinking, what a jerk that this guy was, and thinking that if this is what it takes to succeed, I don't want it. I don't want to do that. But then I realized too, just standing there like a statue doesn't do it either. I mean, there's nothing wrong with engaging.
There's some
people.
in between.
Exactly, and that's what I've been learning ever since. And I still don't like if people are walking by and I'm doing a book signing and just even saying, "Hi, how are you?" Talking about my new book. Are you a cat person or whatever? It doesn't come naturally to me, but there's nothing wrong with engaging people.
And that has worked.
So yeah, exactly. So, so once Jimmy Dabble was published, I thought, well, I got my foot in the publishing business door, and here we go.
Now, how long were you out promoting it? Did it go on for a year, or did it go on for 18 months?
A couple of years,
yeah. For 2 years.
And one other thing, actually, which was a great help, is somebody suggested the Society of Children's Books Writers and Illustrators, and the SCBWI, and they have a great annual convention in Century City, and I went there. I joined the group, went there, and it was phenomenal. There are editors and agents, publishers walking around and approachable, and so and they have a wealth of information. They have workshops and classes, not just there but local throughout the country. And so I belong to an illustrators group in Montrose. We get together once a month in the bookstore, actually, once upon a time in Montreux. So that's been great, and that's really helped me. And then so I was working on a whole different novel, nothing to do with Jimmy Dabble, and which I'm still trying to sell. But I got an agent who I sent him the first 4 chapters or something, and actually I think at some point I decided I need an agent, I need help, somebody to kind of guide me through.
Because you sold Jimmy Dabble without an agent, right?
Yeah.
You did it mainly through your DreamWorks connection.
Right, yeah. So and I realized I really need some help. So, and that in and of itself, I think I applied to a good dozen agencies that all turned me down.
Right.
That wasn't easy, but eventually, I think you need to find one that fits. So I eventually found an agent that wanted to take me on, and he tried to sell this novel that I've been working on with no success. But in the meantime, he said, I may be stating the obvious here, but you're an artist. How about doing a picture book? Instead of a novel, and I thought about it, and to me, I always likened the long form, the novel form of writing versus a picture book writing to feature animation and shorts, and I've always preferred. I mean, I love animated shorts, but I love the storytelling that you could really sink your teeth into.
With the feature, the long form. How long was Jimmy Dabble in terms of word length? Was it 60,000 words, 80,000 words?
Probably about 80,000 words.
80,000 words.
It's about 150 pages, and I did some 70 odd illustrations, black and whites, for it. So and that's quite a change to go. I mean, some picture books have a dozen words. So it's quite different. And another thing too with picture books is that the fewer the words, each word really has meaning. So you really have to go through and look over every single word if it's really necessary, and if it follows, if there's a nice flow.
Sure.
Something that, this may be jumping ahead, but my editor on the first Funnels book had told me when we were nearing the end of just the text, and it overlapped with doing the visuals, but she said, go sit in a room completely by yourself, go in your studio at home, and with the text, and read it out loud as if you're reading it to a child. Pretend you're reading it to your own child, and do it over and over. Read it 3-4 times right in a row, and
do it out loud.
And out loud. It had to be out loud, because the point was not just how the story work is going, but the flow of those words. That what you're trying to say, do you need even a word "and," for example? Can a comma suffice, or do you need a couple of words, or do you need a 2-syllable word versus a 3-syllable, because the flow is a certain way? And it was a great lesson, because I did that a number of times. 3-4 times reading it out loud, then later on the day
Did you ever
do it
record
again.
it and then listen to it?
Oh no, that's funny. That's a brilliant thought. I never thought that. But I did. You do that after you've done that a dozen times. You really sense that how the flow should be, and what's working, what isn't. So I ended up finalizing the text, and we went back and forth. And that's a really fun process too, especially because it's so easy through email.
Right.
That I would send my latest version. My editor would cross out a couple words and add new ones in blue, for example. And so send it back. What do you think of this? And then I would edit that or whatever, and we just continually go back and forth until we settle on the final thing.
Right. Now, let's back up just a wee bit.
Okay.
Because we're talking about the creation of Funnels #1.
Right, yeah.
Which came out in what, 06?
No, 2011.
2011? Oh, okay.
So it was a 10-year gap.
There was a 10-year gap between long-form novel #1 and book number 2, which is essentially basically visual with minimal text.
Right.
So my question is, how did you come to pitch and write Funnels? Yeah,
so the idea of just trying a picture book was my agent's. So I played around, just things, whatever interested me, trying to come up with an idea. And I don't particularly, how do you put that? I don't like forcing an idea where it's like I have to come up with a picture book idea. What do I do? As opposed to ideas that just naturally come to you.
Right.
But that is what I was trying to do. I was consciously looking for something to do as a short, small piece. And meanwhile, we have this cat at home. He's massive. He weighs almost 30 pounds.
Right.
Black and white cat, and not necessarily thinking of a book, but I would just sketch him. Again, he struck these really funny poses. And then one day I just thought, well, why not him? Let's do something about him. And so I came up with a basic idea of a day in his life and sort of that routine of what he does each day. And so it was almost documentary style of, and our cat's name is Felix, which I couldn't use, so I came up with Funnels. But he, waking up or spending the night, my wife didn't want him walking around the house because his meowing would keep us awake, so we kept him in the downstairs bathroom in the laundry basket. He loves sleeping on laundry. So he wakes up, and then once he's fed, because that's his priority #1. That's his priority.
That's
how
he keeps his girth.
Yeah. And and then playing with our daughter, maybe a little visit outside in the backyard anyway. And
right.
So I kind of came up with this from waking up to the end of the day when he lies on my daughter's bed, and then when I go to bed, I take him and bring him downstairs to the bathroom. And And so I sent that to my editor, and there was humor in it, but he said, this is kind of dry. I mean, he says, I like it, and he's kind of a fun character, but you need more personality in him, and I think you need more plot. So I played around with that, and also I made an actual dummy as he.
Now this is after they've said, yeah, we'll develop and take on the book.
No. This is just
with your. This is just with your agent,
right? And basically him trying to get me to do something that he thinks he could sell.
Right. Oh, sure. Yeah. Right.
Yeah. So he suggested doing a dummy, which is a normal thing for picture books, that you make a fake book, and I made an actual physical book. Now I do it all digitally, but I did all the drawings, pasted them up, and kind of just with a stapler or something, and taped in the text and put it together in an actual hard copy book, and then I physically sent that to my editor, my agent, and so he came up with some ideas on how to rework it. So I went and changed it, and I ended up making about 5 versions of that.
Just from the agent's suggestion.
Right, yeah.
So was you working on it probably over a year's time or something?
Yeah. This took a fair amount of time, and really this is him essentially acting as an editor, but getting it to the point where he felt it had a good chance of being sold. But along the ways too, in thinking of plots, I came up with what the storyline ultimately was, which was this indoor cat, and I pushed how he was pampered. And our cat was indoors for 3 years because we live in the hills of Glendale, where there are coyotes out there and all sorts of wildlife. So we for his own safety, he stayed indoors. And then when he was 3, we let him outside into the backyard, and he's too fat to climb over the fence, so he was safe. And so that became the basic story idea of this fat indoor pampered cat who suddenly looks out the window and sees his whole world that he can't partake of, and decides he's going to have an adventure, and he sneaks outside. And so I got it to the point where my agent basically said, this is beyond my expertise to go any further. I think we have something here. And so it took him about 6 months, but eventually he sold it. And I remember being at Disney.
You know how many publishers it went to before?
Yeah, let's see.
Half dozen?
No, over a dozen, definitely. And the funny thing there too, and I had sent Jimmy Dabble before pitching it at DreamWorks on my own to a number of places, and when you don't have an agent, you wait months.
Well, and
months.
You get on the slush pile.
Exactly.
Maybe they look at it, maybe they don't.
Right. You're lucky to hear from them at all. You're lucky to get a no.
Yeah.
So, which is better than nothing. But anyway, so he was a great help. I mean, he would hear back within a day or two sometimes. At the utmost a week. So, and then some of these comments that I got, and he used the fact that I worked at Disney to our advantage, but I would get some of these comments where, it's too commercial from the one, and then another would say it's not commercial enough, push it further, and right away, clearly the Disney style, this isn't illustration style, this is Disney. Well, so in some ways it worked against me. But yeah, eventually, one day he called and just completely out of the blue, and I was fairly frustrated because the early sending out that he did, we'd hear back quickly, and then as time went on, you
heard back more slowly.
Exactly, yeah. So at one point it had been, I think, about a month, and I was even wondering, okay, is he doing the job?
What am I doing with it?
Yeah, what's happening? Yeah. Should I give up on it? And he called me out of the blue, and he actually had a 2-book deal.
Oh, really?
So yeah, I mean, I had no idea for a second story at all. Never considered it.
Simon & Schuster said we want 2.
Yeah. So yeah.
Then how much more shaping? Okay, you did a lot of shaping after the initial idea with the agent.
Right.
So how much more reworking and reshaping was it when you finally got the publishing deal with Simon & Schuster?
Well, I think the deal was pretty much made based on that. But yeah, we did quite a bit. The editor was terrific, just working with it. And her first pass, she just went through and really simplified. There were a lot of things where, in hindsight, I saw that were repetitive. There's a run-in with the neighbor's dog, and there was quite a bit of chasing. You know, the dog chasing the cat, which she really narrowed down to just 2 illustrations.
Right.
And yeah, really doing her job, where getting to the points of the story and adding a couple of some little plot points, some little adventurous things, and dealing with the text, and also really pushing the character that and I think in the second book I really kind of learned to understand his character, but the idea, there were some hints of it I think in the first book, that just how delusional he is of his own abilities or lack thereof. So, and that really became his character, that he just thinks he's able to do all sorts of stuff
that he really can't.
Right. Yeah. So climbing a 3-foot couch somehow prepared him for climbing a 50-foot tree. So and so that was a lot of fun in that, and we kind of zeroed in on the text as well. I kind of wanted something kind of droll, kind of dry. Understated, and so we really pushed toward that, and so yeah, we really got it into shape. So, and it's funny too. Now I remember there's an example where Fuddles tries climbing the tree, and he only gets about 4 feet up, and then so he's at the, say, if this is the tree that you see,
a little bit higher than the couch.
Yeah. But he's at the bottom. He's at the base of the tree, having slid down, and there are wood shavings where his nails went down the side of the tree. But my idea had been that the preceding page was, or a few pages back, was where he was practicing for the great outdoors, and so you saw him climbing a footstool actually. And so what I wanted on the page where he's climbing the tree is to see a big tree and this tiny little cat that can't remotely get this high. I wanted to show the height that he needed to get, right. And the art director came in and just cropped my picture, whereas my picture was like this with Fuddles here. She made it this and Fuddles there. And I said, well, but we're losing the scale. We're not seeing how small this cat is up against this giant tree, to show that he's not prepared at all for climbing this height. But they said, that your character needs to fill the screen, the page. So
it doesn't read if it's this big.
Yeah, and so there are a lot of things that I've learned in animation that I had to unlearn a bit in illustration. So, or specifically book illustration. And things like if you have an open book here, so this is the left-hand page, the cat generally should face that way on this page and that on this page.
Right, so they're facing each other.
Right, yeah.
The same cat is facing each other.
Unless if you have what's called a page turn, you have an idea that or something that's going to be answered on the next page. Maybe you want your character facing that way, so it's obvious to turn the page and see the result of the preceding action. But there are a lot of things like from storyboarding too, screen direction that I had been drummed into me for forever about, be consistent on your screen direction. That means nothing in publishing.
Yeah, they don't care.
Yeah. They really take each page on its own, or they look at the 2-page as one big graphic, but things like screen direction means nothing, or page direction.
Crossing the line they don't care about.
Nope.
Not at all.
So yeah, I learned a lot on that.
And then, so that book comes out, and so let's concentrate a little bit on your book is written, edited, polished, published, and it's out in the marketplace, out at a bookstore near you. Now,
some of them.
Does Simon & Schuster now pull a penguin and say, okay, you're on your own? Or was there something in between? And what did you learn from the first experience that translated in, Mr. Fisher, I'm going to have to really get down and drill down deep and do some self-promotion and book promotion on my own, because I'm not going to be able to rely on the publisher to do it. So we both want this to succeed, so I'm going to do a lot of the heavy lifting. What did you take away from the first book and learn in the second, and what did you do in the second?
I was certainly prepared to do the heavy lifting, and did quite a bit of that. Simon & Schuster did a fair amount of things. They assigned me, or they gave me a number of a publicist, an email address, and so any questions or any book signings I wanted to do, they said make sure send it to her. She would put it on the Simon & Schuster website. They could contact the store and help them with their needs.
So did you find that helpful?
It was helpful, but it was still most of it came to me, and especially me initiating things.
Sure.
So some stores actually prefer to deal directly with the publisher, and so requested, to have them call me or write me. Let's see. I did a trip to Northern California there, which I'm about to do for the current book, where they did pay for my flight and a rental car, which is great.
This is for book one.
For book one, yeah.
So where did your book signing tour take you for book one? Because I'm assuming you did a lot more book signings and touring
here
for the picture book than you did for the first one.
Right. Yeah. I didn't do any real trips for the first book. So I did quite a few around here. And the thing is, I wasn't working at Disney when Jimmy Dabble came out, the first book. So I definitely used the Disney name. I would call up stores and say, I'm a Disney animator. I have a book published by Simon & Schuster, and blah blah blah. And the internet by then, and Amazon. I'm sure Amazon existed. It was in its infancy, I think, when Jimmy Dabble came out.
Yeah.
But what's great with any actual store as opposed to Amazon is I could call up a store, and they, while on the phone with me, could look up on Amazon and see Fuddles, the book exists, and could see who I am. And there's an author's page on Amazon where you could post your own things. I could email images to stores. Some Barnes & Noble stores prefer to deal with the publisher, and they have their headquarters that deal with these things, so I can put them in touch with each other. So it still happens that oftentimes a store wouldn't stock the book, and then I would call them, try to set up a book signing, and thereby have them stock it.
We push them, nudge them into stocking the book. Which is always useful.
Yeah. And also, so our local bookstore in Montrose, once upon a time, I've known the owner for years, and she, especially, we all know the plight of especially independent stores, bookstores, how challenging times are.
Oh, yeah.
And what they need to do to set themselves apart.
It's challenging for the chains, so
even
you can only imagine the...
Borders is now gone, so... But independent stores have to be personable and really work within their community. And so our local store owner came up with the idea of bring your actual cat.
Oh,
and
yeah.
I thought, that's
I remember
crazy.
You telling me about this.
Okay, yeah, so we did discuss it. And it went really well, actually. And throughout the rest of that year, I mean, she did a lot to promote the book, which is great. And things like, because I live fairly close by, she would do it that if a couple of books had been sold and people requested my signing, then, the following weekend or whatever, I could just stop by the store and sign a handful of books. And I always do a little drawing of Fuddles in it. And so that was great. Yeah. And Fuddles ended up being their top-selling book of the year. So I actually tied with Marla Frazee, who's a phenomenal illustrator and very successful. So I'm
well, if you could only have done that with every single bookstore in the country.
Oh my gosh!
Cloned yourself.
Yeah.
You would have been gangbusters. Well.
Yeah.
Yeah. I just wonder. I guess the question I have, springing from this, do you say, okay, I'm going to do a real marketing campaign. I'm going to sign books in this city. And then next weekend I'm going to go to this city, and then next city I'm going to, that you're just basically...
Yeah. I mean, the location of the stores are more random. I mean, I basically call stores and just see when they have time available. But I did do it in Northern California, of course. If I'm physically flying somewhere, I've got to do what I can in a time period.
Sure, absolutely.
And what's great too is that doing a school visit, that's where you can really sell a lot of books. So on this current trip coming up, I have to fly out on Halloween night, unfortunately.
Oh my gosh!
Because I have a signing first thing in the morning, November 1st. But yeah, that whole week, boy, a lot of them, and it was all initiated by me, and then with help from Simon and Schuster.
Yeah.
There's one day I'm going up. And my family live in San Jose, so I can stay with my brother's house, and then I'm going to one of his kids' schools as well. But that kind of is my base, and then I have a rental car, and then just boom, go from there to all these various places. So one day I'm going to Santa Rosa.
Sure.
And I'm spending the preceding night there because I have a 9 a.m. School date.
Sure.
But I have 3 school dates in a row, 9 and 11 and 1 p.m. And then I have a store visit, and the store that's setting up all these school visits. So then I have a 4 p.m. bookstore visit, and then I have a 6 p.m. School fair. So I've got 4 schools and a bookstore visit. In one day, and then I'm driving back to San Jose because the next morning I'm going to my niece's school.
Well, you're going to be a busy man.
Yeah. And in fact, I'm flying home on Friday morning. I forget the following week, and that evening I have something in West LA, a pajama book party at a school, and then the next Saturday morning I have another book signing. So
wow.
And partially, and I'm really pushing. I have a lot to cram into a short period of time because it's a Christmas book. So come January,
come January, it's not going to be a top seller because
nope.
Christmas, and then they'll release it again the next year.
Yeah, that's what I'm hoping.
Here's my question: do you have some national ideas? Like, okay, I'm doing California, got that covered. Then I'll hit the Chicago area, or I'll hit this, or I'll hit that. Or does Simon and Schuster say, you could do this area, or you could, or I don't even know.
They haven't dealt with me, at least in those ways. No, I mean, I'm doing another trip to New York and Philadelphia. And actually, my wife has a friend. Her best friend lives in Baltimore. So we're actually, the two of us, we haven't been anywhere on our own for ages. So it's a bit of an anniversary trip for us. Our anniversary is in October. But the week before Thanksgiving, we're going to the East Coast, but we're paying for that ourselves.
Sure.
And I just can't afford to go 1 week to Chicago and then,
Sure, absolutely. You can't be hopping all over the country on your own.
No, as much as I'd love to. So, and especially too, because during these trips, I mean, I'll have my computer with me, and I'm doing freelance work. I'm balancing the book stuff, which right now doesn't pay me anything other than the advances that I get. But yeah, I'm not earning anything on these trips. All I'm doing is spending.
Right.
So
you got to double up. You got to make it a vacation. You got to make it a trip to see your brother. You got to do something. Right. Yeah, I understand that.
Yeah.
So, how long now is book number 1, Book Fuddles number 1, still out and about?
Yeah. In fact, the thing that I've been hoping, and the sales are not that great, but Simon & Schuster is apparently happy with them within the world of picture books, and happy enough to let me do a second book.
Right.
And what's nice is that I've done 3 school visits so far, and where a bookstore will handle sales. And what's nice, as I'd hoped, is that the new book is helping sell the old book as well.
You get a whole series.
So yeah, it's in fact, not to jump ahead, but there's a third Fuddles book that I want to do.
Yeah.
And I sent my editor some time ago an outline, and she loved it. And then she told me, I got to take it to the acquisition people. That's the way it goes. Is that an editor, if they see a manuscript they like, they then have to convince the money people.
Board.
Right.
Now, my question was Fuddles #2, second book, was that book 2 of your contract as far as Simon & Schuster was concerned?
Yeah. Although, without ever knowing what the second book would be, they simply, and I told you, I was completely shocked and surprised that I had a 2-book deal. And in fact, when the first book was done, again, just like with Jimmy Dabble, my editor left a few months before that book came out. It was her own choice. She actually left New York City and moved to another city. And she was great, and I was really heartbroken. I thought we had this great partnership, and for the second time in 2 books, I was left without an editor. And then I was assigned a new editor, but she had no emotional connection to Fuddles, so I really had to convince her of more. And secondly, so when the first book was done, it wasn't out yet, but it was finished. I was ready to just, okay, let's do book #2. Let's get this rolling, because publishing moves so slowly.
Right.
And I was told, well, let's just see how the book sells.
They want to see how it performs in the marketplace.
Yeah. So I had to wait for the book to come out, and then I had to wait and see how the book sold.
Yeah. That makes sense.
So in the meantime, I just worked on different picture books and sent those along to both my agent to pitch around, as well as my editor, and didn't get anywhere. None of those so far have been bought.
And they let you know that they wanted another Fuddles book.
Right. Yeah. I sent finally. In fact, I was reworking one of the ideas for a different book, and my editor said, really, Franz, all we want is another Fuddles book, which, one can have worse problems. I was basically told I could do another book. So, okay. And I had heard, it wasn't even my idea, but I remember the first editor before leaving saying something about it'd be fun to do a Christmas book, and I had latched onto that, and so I came up with an idea, kind of reworked it a bit, and just in an outline sent that to my editor. Just text, and she loved it, and then it was funny too. Let's see, when was this now? Because I think it was February of 2012, and I remember her saying that. So she loved it, and she said, give me a week or so to work with this. I'll get back to you. Well, that week became 6 weeks, which is normal. But then she said, okay, she had some notes, and we discussed them over the phone, and I loved her notes. And so this is our first time to work together, because she was the new editor, and I really didn't even know her. But she had great ideas, and it just seemed like she knew Fuddles, the personality, really well. Just right away got him and what I wanted to do with him, and I thought she was really funny, and so she had these notes, and then she said, okay, well, we're too late for 2013, so it'll have to be a Christmas 2014 release, and this was early, the second month
early
of
in 2012,
and I thought,
what?
You've got to be kidding me, that's almost 3 years away. And she said, well, yeah, we have to plan this in advance.
Yeah, but she was wrong.
Yeah, well, what she then said, if you can finish the entire book, by, I think she said August or September of 2012, and I just thought, I'll kill myself, whatever it takes, I'll do it. And I pretty much did. I think it was October when I was pretty well done with the book. So, so then we had this new partnership, the two of us working together, and boy, she was just great. Just a lot of great ideas.
And then gone.
No. This is now our second. This is my current, and she's still there. Thank God. She, the new book came out, and she's still there. And in fact, I sent her. Yeah, I'm keeping my fingers crossed. Not whatever. But I sent her an idea for a third Fuddles book, which she loves, and but again, she had to take that to the acquisition people.
So you haven't heard back on the acquisition?
Well, yeah, basically they said, let's see how the book sells, the Christmas book.
Just like before.
Exactly, yeah. Nothing's changed.
Well,
but that's pretty much how publishing works too. You basically earn the right to do a next book by the sales on your previous.
Yeah, exactly.
So.
publish or perish, sell or perish. I think that's the whole.
Yep.
That's the whole deal.
Yeah.
So okay, so you've got an idea for the third one.
Yeah.
And do you have any estimate of when the third one will be coming out?
No, because I mean I haven't been given the go-ahead to do it. I'm playing around with it anyway. I'm going to make my own dummy, I think, at my own pace. But really, for me right now, job one is just to sell as many copies of this Christmas book.
So promotion.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, any way I can. So buy Fuddles, everybody.
That's right. Buy the book.
Yeah.
So.
I can tell you real quick what I want to do for a third book is that so you have this pampered indoor cat who thinks everything is all about him, and I think the second book, the Christmas book, really zeroes in on that more. That he wakes up smelling some delicious odor, wakes him up, and he goes in to see what his family is making for him. And the family, the idea is that the family is getting ready for a Christmas party. And as much as they pamper the cat, he is nothing but in the way. Everybody's got their job to do. They're all scurrying around, and people are arriving and decorating. And everywhere he goes, he's in the way. When he thinks, he just knows it's all about him.
It's all about him.
Yeah. So now the third book, where we have this character who just is the center of the world, and he wakes up and he gets licked by a puppy. So the family is taking on a puppy. And he the cat
competition.
Yeah, and the cat can't stand it, and so gradually, and this will be tricky too visually. What I want to do is that this puppy over the 30 pages of the book grows and grows. So at first the cat is much bigger and just shoves him aside, and I picture things like the cat has his own pillow, and after eating or whatever, he comes to his pillow and he's aghast to see that this mutt is on his pillow. Yeah, is butting in. So he just pushes him aside.
Yeah.
Right. But by the end of the book, the two are pals, and now where the cat was the bigger, now there's this massive German Shepherd dog.
And then book number 4 will be the buddy adventure.
Yeah, exactly. The two of them. Yeah.
So what have you learned? Wrapping this up, what have you learned being in the publishing game from? I mean, because you've been in it one way or the other for about a dozen years now.
Yeah.
And what have you learned, and how is it the same as the animation business, and how is it different?
Yeah, well, relating it to animation, there is a teamwork. It's just it's a much smaller team, but you definitely
you and the editor
and the art director.
Yeah.
And it's, I mean, they come up. They have a different point of view than I do. I still see everything as a film, and I kind of compose things that way. And so they have their point of view, which is very different from that.
It's a book.
And especially with Fuddles, I did a fair amount of struggling with the first book because it's vertical, whereas I've always thought horizontal.
Sure.
So that's a bit of a challenge.
You're not thinking book page, you're thinking screen shape size.
Right, yeah. And I love depth and things being out of focus or however you focus the eye, but you have to do it in a flat illustration. And it doesn't move. So one illustration has to say a lot as opposed to several cuts or a moving camera that shows things developing. So that, and there is a lot of teamwork there, but
just a smaller team.
Yeah, it's a smaller team, but it is awfully rewarding, and I love working on a film with a lot of people as well. I think it's great to have this big team effort and how long that you can work on a film. But it's really cool to do your own thing too.
Sure.
And you do find out it might be your idea initially, but it does become everybody that works on the book. The editor does have a lot of input. The editor on the second book was much more visually involved than the first one. The editor of the first book really just said, they're the experts on that, and I'm going to
Sure.
let the art director deal with that.
Yeah.
So that wasn't the case here, but yeah, and you feed off of each other just like you do in film. I mean, any kind of collaboration. I got a lot of good ideas from the editor, which I then took and pushed further. So
Yeah. Oh yeah. Well, you know,
yeah,
you
and,
take a good idea and run with it.
yeah,
you know?
exactly, yeah. And I think the promotion side of it is that I remember for the longest time I resisted blogging, for example, and because of the time commitment.
Yeah. Oh yeah.
And I have gotten into that. And on the one hand, you can complain and say, "Oh my God, you have to do this, you have to do that, and blah blah blah."
So
But on the other hand,
to be in the game.
yeah, but the thing is, it's an opportunity. It's there.
So, do you have a Fuddles blog?
Yeah, I have. It's called Pampered Fat Cat. It's on WordPress. And so twice a week I blog, and which doesn't sound like much, but it's not easy to just keep that up, and I'm pretty religiously keeping that going.
And how has that paid off? Do you have a viewership and all that?
Yeah,
kind of
yeah,
stuff?
and it's not huge, but what I have learned is for every blog post that I do, it immediately goes out to Facebook and Twitter and LinkedIn. Where else? I think there's a couple of others, and I do Pinterest. So all these things are there for you to take advantage of.
So did you set them up so you do the WordPress blog post and then you've linked to all these others
Right.
so that it goes out as different things? Oh yeah,
Right.
there's people doing. The other thing is there's people doing Vines attached to Twitters, and
Oh God, yeah, I still got to get into
Vine
that.
is a 7-second.
Right, video.
I mean, you could take 7 seconds of your
Yeah.
video
Right.
and put it out as a Vine.
Yeah, I
and-
should do that.
And put it at the end of Twitter
Right. Yeah.
and link it to a blog post. I mean, there's all kinds of
Yeah.
things.
Yeah. So it's good, and there are other things where I continually find new blogs of where it's parents for kids literature, moms or dads who have their own thing and they have their readership.
Yeah.
And so I just contact them and say, and this is actually, and Simon & Schuster's been fairly helpful with this, where a blog that reviews books, and I'll contact them and I'll say, here's a post or here's a link to my website or whatever. You can see what my book is. Do you care to do a review of it or an interview or whatever? And they'll say, most of them will say, if you can get me a copy of the book, then yeah, I'll give you an honest review, one positive or negative or whatever. So, and Simon & Schuster's been good for the most part in supplying those books. So
Sure.
I don't have to
Sure.
do that out of my own pocket. So sometimes I've done that, but in those ways they've been good.
Oh, that's good.
So, yeah.
So it sounds to me like you're in this for the long haul and you're going to do more books.
Yeah, I hope so. I mean, I'd love to make a living from it, even though I don't want to leave animation either.
Right.
But yeah. And another thing, actually, where I'd love to merge the two is I'd love to do more animation with Fuddles. I'd love to do a
Holiday special.
or an app even, and a book app where I can take the book and actually try to figure clever ways to do some nice animation without costing a whole lot.
Right. Right.
Use cycles and whatnot, and just do very simple little bits, but really do some fun storytelling using animation. So yeah, there's a lot of possibilities.
And you'll probably be exploring them in the months and years to come. Well, that's interesting.
Yeah.
Especially because it's kind of a parallel career to your
Exactly.
your whole animation career.
And I know we all know so many people in animation. Animators that I know, and then technical people. In fact, Dan Larson did all the camera work and the paint work on my two book trailers, and boy, I'd love to get him involved. And,
on the app and all that stuff.
Yeah, and other people that know the various formats and all the things that I want to do.
Yeah.
So.
Well, it sounds great. Well, thank you, Mr. Vischer, for
thank you
sitting down and doing this with us, and we'll talk to you again soon.
Yeah.